Welcome to the Greg Dwyer Radio Show on Building Fortunes Radio with your host, motivational speaker Greg Dwyer. Be sure to check out Greg at www.gregdwyer.com. That's www.gregdwyer.com. Now on to our show. Take it away, Greg.
How many people say that they want to write a book and they just never get around to it? You know, there's some people that actually do it. They're high achievers, they're focused, and they make it happen. My guest today is Tamelynda Lux. She is a freelance writer and a published author. I have in my hand, and I'm really excited, I have in my hand her book that I just got from Amazon, which you should check out too if you want to write a book. Get my book done now. It will help you stay focused. Tamelynda, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for being on the podcast. This is going to be fun.
Oh, I'm sure it will be fun, Greg. Thanks for having me.
So you've been an entrepreneur for years. You've been speaking. I watched a couple of your YouTube videos. You've done a lot of things. And I will tell you this, if we had 2, 3, 4 hours, we couldn't scratch the surface. I know you're also a hypnotherapist. You have a wonderful backstory. But I want to talk today, and I want to focus on helping people and my listeners get out of the rut. And if they have a book in them, how can they make it happen? So how did you get involved with this? I know you started writing books yourself many years ago. You shared that information. But how did you get interested in being an editor and helping people in the process?
That's a great question. And the answer is I believe the seed was back in 1988 when I owned a word processing center near the University of Western Ontario. I'm in London, Ontario, Canada. And at the time, I had 4 full-time typists. This was before computers were common in the home and laptops I don't even think existed then. And in the building where we had our office and the gals were typing away these student essays, there were psychologists and counselors, and I was doing some editing for them. And around either 1989 or 1990, into the word processing center came a young man about my age, and he and his father were co-authoring a book, and they asked me if we would type it up and then asked me if I would edit it. And that was my first formal edit of a nonfiction book. So the seed was planted way back then in 1988, 89, and I continued editing through the years as a paid hobby, primarily locally here in Canada.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow.
And
wow.
Yeah.
I was going to take a jab here, just a shot in the dark. I would have to think that maybe like me, you actually love books, like you're constantly learning, constantly growing, constantly, expanding your reach on different subjects, whether that be hypnosis or counseling, helping people in this area. Why editing and why helping people publish a book? Like, tell me why that's like really passionate for you.
You're right. I read a lot, but I don't tend to read fiction. In fact, one year, I think the last fiction book I had, it was a novel, it was a paperback, and, we go to the beach for some half-day trips, and that novel sat in my knapsack. It took me 3 years to write what would take any other fiction reader probably a day and a half to read. It took me 3 years to finish it. I read a lot of nonfiction, and what got me into editing was seeing the mistakes and the errors and the inconsistencies in a book that really turned me off of continuing with a book. It's such a shame. You put all the effort into putting down on paper what's in your head, what's in your heart, what the messages you want to present to the world, and then don't take that extra step to clean it up and present it properly. We can, as editors, maintain your voice. And as I say, for my practice and the specialty that I have is your voice matters. So I ensure that your voice stays. I'm just cleaning it up and helping you present to the best ability that we can, but maintaining your voice. So it really hurt. It pained me to see some of these books many of these books with errors in them. And, I have not found a book to date. In fact, I'm in several editor peer support groups on Facebook and other ways. We have not found one book that is 100% perfect. There might be one error, there might be a couple, but to see multiple errors in grammar, punctuation, spelling, or there's lots of ways to have errors. It hurts. It hurts us as editors. It pains us, and it particularly pained me. I come from a very detail-oriented perspective, and I want the book to make sense to me. I want it to be an easy experience, an enjoyable journey. And as soon as there are errors and inconsistencies, I kind of feel like the author loses credibility with me as a reader. And I'm not alone in that. So that's where, I really, why editing? That's why. I want to save other readers from the pain, but I want to help authors present themselves in the best light possible.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I love to read, just like you. I constantly buy books. I get around to them sometimes. My house looks like a library, and I read a lot. And I'll tell you, about 5 years ago, an acquaintance wrote a book. He self-published it. I got it. I was really excited about it. The mistakes, and I'm not an English major, but the mistakes I couldn't believe it. And I loved what he had to say, but what was presented to me really put a bad taste in my mouth. And you want to enjoy a book. It's like a steak, or if you're a vegetarian, you want to eat a nice big salad. But all I can tell you is it put a bad taste in my mouth. And about 3 months ago, I'm sitting with a good friend of mine. His name is Tim David. He's a speaker and he's a writer. And I said, what's the secret? And he says, you better hire a really good line editor. You better have somebody to clean up your stuff. And he said that's the magic. He wrote a book called Magic Words. And he said that's the key. To have somebody look over your text and help you with it is worth $1 million. Now, does it cost $1 million? Like, what are we talking about? Hundreds of thousands? Hundreds of dollars? What's the ballpark figure for a 15, 20 chapter book, do you think?
It depends who you're going to. I mean, we have editors who are charging per word. You can get somebody at half a cent a word up to 5 or 6 cents a word. And then you have those of us who charge on an hourly basis. So then when someone comes to me and asks, okay, so you charge hourly, how much will my, on average, right, a nonfiction book might be 30,000 words on average. How much will that be? Well, how long is a piece of string?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it really depends on what skill you have in writing.
Yes. Yeah. And if you go to Fiverr or you go to one of these things overseas, you're going to get what you pay for. It might be really cheap. And I remember our friend Richard Nongard saying, hey, you get what you pay for. If you're going to go cheap here, you're going to look bad. It's not going to be good. It's like having somebody design your front cover of your book. You really want to make it look really good as well.
It's an investment in you. That's what you need to remember. Yep. And you have value. You are worth. You've taken the time to put your message down on paper. So put the investment into. Okay, think of a birthday cake, right? You take the time to bake the birthday cake. What kind of icing do you want to give it? Do you want a sloppy job, or do you want a beautiful, wonderful job so that it's inviting to eat? And so you're going to put the investment in. And so that from the editing world, the investment is in the quality of the editor. And it's not to say that a $35 an hour editor is any worse than a $75 or $95 an hour editor. It's all about, it's really about the quality of the editing. It's about the credibility and the legitimacy of the editor. I remember when I was looking around to have someone help me, I had a few too many projects on my desk. And I thought, well, I'll have an editor help me with the first pass, because we do a number of passes on a book. which means each pass we look at something different and make sure we catch what we missed on the first pass. And I thought I'll have somebody help me. And so I did the test drive on 3 other editors. And you could, and they were all different prices, and you could tell who had just used software and hadn't actually read the words. It was instant. I was shocked. And then the editors where you say, well, I want to keep my voice, but clean it up, and they totally rewrote it. Well, that's not what I asked for. So, you have to be clear when you're speaking to an editor what it is you want, but you have to be clear on looking at their credentials and their background. Most editors will show you which books they've worked on. When you go to my website, you'll see some of the books, not all of the books, and you'll see some of the testimonials from the author clients I've worked with, but not all of them. And I only work with independent authors right now.
Okay. Well, I value your time, and you're an expert. What's the website? How do people go? How do they find you? And I know you have more than just this website. You have this book on Amazon. You have other books. You have a card deck that you can buy through you. So how do people get a hold of you and connect with you if they want to follow up on this?
Oh, I'm so thankful that you asked. Thanks so much, Greg. Okay, so TamelyndaLux.com/editing takes you directly to my editing and proofreading page. And then there are links in there. The easiest way to get hold of me is to go to the appointments page on TamelyndaLux.com and book a 20-minute free consult. I do everything by Zoom. I don't meet anybody in person. But, now I'm global, right? In 1989 when I started, I was really only working locally. The pandemic came in 2020, and my work, I have independent author clients who are published and also works in progress around the world. So we do everything by Zoom and email now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. I guess, I'm drinking a glass of water here. It's depending on if it's half full, half empty. But I have heard, and I can say it too, some of the things really have worked out for me in the last couple of years. I've been involved in travel for years, a decade and so, and that hasn't really panned out that well. But other things have, and so the fact that you can work with people all over the world, they don't have to be in Canada, they can be anywhere, and you can work with them through email, through Zoom. It's actually a great thing. So the other question I wanted to ask, and, we don't script this. This is just going with the flow. What are some of the big mistakes that people should avoid? I have friends that are listening right now, and I can see that they're listening, and they say, I want to write a book about my son or my brother or my memoir. What are some of the mistakes that you've seen? Not grammatically, because we could be talking about that forever. But I mean, huge mistakes. I guess the one would be I never got started, right? That would be one. But some of the mistakes that hold people back. And I ask this because I know you're a hypnotist and I know you really know psychology. But what are some of the things that are really blocking people?
Imposter syndrome comes to mind, number one. So we all have that little gremlin inside of us that says, you're not good enough. Other people have written on that topic. Look how many books are already on that topic. The world doesn't need another book, and especially written by you. Well, we've all been there. We can all, right? We've all been there. I mean, Greg, you're working on a book, aren't you?
Yeah. And I got, the Gremlin, sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my first book, published in 2015, was my personal journey through wrongful dismissal, surviving it and then moving past it and thriving beyond it. It took me 10 years to actually write the book and publish the book because of that imposter syndrome gremlin that sat there. And then eventually, I said, I actually hired a coach that year in 2014, and I said to a life coach, I'm a life coach too, but I hired a life coach for me, and I said, I want to publish this book. This book is important, and at the time as a life coach, I was doing a lot of career transition coaching, and so I said, this is important to my clients. I want to put it in a book, and that's the goal we're working on. So help me get to that goal. So we picked a date, which was in March on my birthday. I was turning 50 in 2015. And I said, this is my 50th birthday present to myself. And I don't want to let that imposter syndrome gremlin keep niggling at me and harassing me. I want to write this book. So we had the coaching, and she was my accountability. She also came to my book signing. It was so fabulous on my birthday. And I actually typed up the book in 30 days, and that was December. And then it went through the editing process and then the publishing process. And at the time, I did not self-publish on Amazon because I didn't know how to do that. I found a local publisher, printer, and did it the hard way, the expensive way. But now with print on demand, you do Amazon and Ingram Spark. And 2-3 days before my 50th birthday and my book launch, my box of books arrived. So it was really important to have a life coach, an accountability partner to be there for me when that imposter syndrome gremlin kept popping up. Now, so many years later, right? We're now in 2022. As a hypnosis practitioner, I can help people through hypnosis work through that imposter syndrome gremlin and have that conversation with that gremlin to set it aside. So when you ask about, what are some of the big obstacles, I would think that to me stands out as number one.
Yeah. And while you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I know there's 3 hats here, but I know there's probably more. But yes, coach, hypnotist, editor. I mean, if someone came to you and said, hey, look, I really want to write this book and I don't want to spend 10 years, you're able to take someone, from decades to days. I mean, you did this in 30 days. So you're able to help someone be accountable using hypnosis, which is, I believe in hypnosis. I've been to the conventions, I've practiced, I've studied. I think we're all in a state of hypnosis, even when we have the gremlin saying, you can't do it, you can't do it. I mean, that's a little bit of hypnosis. And you're able to break the spell and help them. And then when you get the copy, you can edit it and make them look really great. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, and I don't break the spell. I help guide them so they break the spell. So that imposter syndrome quiets down. What we give them as hypnotists, we don't do it to you, right? We give you the tools through hypnosis so that you can help yourself. And that is super important because, they say, what do they say? Go give a fish or teach a fish. It's like teaching to fish, right? We want you to be successful. And these triggers don't go away, so you need to learn how to manage that. So same thing with this imposter syndrome thing. And then guess what's really exciting? Once you publish your first book, you're probably going to get hooked, and you're probably going to write your next book. And that leads me to the book that's coming up at the end of this summer is How to Create a Workbook, because that's the second easiest book to write after you write your nonfiction book. And as I'm editing, I get here's the excitement coming, right? I get super excited when I can envision for my author client their next book, which is typically a workbook. I'm going, oh my gosh, I can see this now as a workbook. And that's the next second book to write, and it's easy, and it's just so easy to envision. So my book at the end of the summer will be How to Create a Workbook.
Yeah, and it's funny, while you're talking, I'm having flashbacks to like a week ago maybe. You were posting on Facebook, hey, here is some of the copy that I'm looking at for the workbook. What do you think of this picture? Didn't you do that about a week ago?
I did, and guess what? I totally had it redone, and I haven't presented the new cover. It's even better than what you saw. Yeah.
But it's nice because it's a process, and not only the process, but you're telling people once you write the book, now you have another idea. If it's a nonfiction book and it's business or whatever, metaphysical, you can create a workbook. Boy, that's worth $1 million. So besides the imposter syndrome, and I believe you, I have it. Very successful people. In fact, it came up a couple weeks ago at a Tony Robbins event. Everyone seems to have that, unless you're a little off and crazy. What is one other thing? Obviously, it would probably be people that just don't get around to it. They're just too darn busy. But procrastination. But what is another thing, just one more thing that you see over and over and over again that stops people besides this gremlin?
Okay, so yes, Greg, we can agree that the next one is procrastination. But the third one I would say is content. So I have an idea but I really don't know how to flesh it out and build enough content to make a book. And that, again, is where a coach can help. And, you know, you and I met through Dr. Richard Nongard and his 12-week book course that he runs almost every 14 weeks. He starts a new group. Yep. And he has amazing guidelines in there. But when I started with him in July 2020, he had this easy way of, you know, come up with your 10 or 12 chapter titles and then come up with the top 15 questions people would want to ask or know about for each of those chapters. But even with that, you know what, if you're working in isolation, it can be very challenging to come up with that content. So finding someone who's a great creative brainstormer with you, and again, that's something, I mean, I love brainstorming. It's in my nature as a life coach to be brainstorming with clients. But, you know, Greg, I think you would be great at brainstorming. We could probably brainstorm together, you know, a whole bunch of stuff, not even book related. But content, you know, we have an idea and then we go, yeah, but that's not really enough for a book. Okay, but there's ways to find it. There's ways to build on a concept. I actually, back in I'm thinking probably 1992, my husband and I, we were having a glass of wine. He was probably having a beer and sitting at the fireplace. And we started a book on book title ideas. And each one, I have it somewhere. It's a little spiral bound. And it has the concept, and then it has a couple of chapter ideas in there.
Wow.
Content.
Wow,
Content is king, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. I mean, you don't want to sit down and invest your time and money in a book, and there's nothing to be said. Now, I will tell you, I have in my hand, Get My Book Done Now, and I love it because, I mean, talk about motivation. I mean, this is not get around to your book someday. This is get around to your writing your book now. I'm looking at some of these chapter headlines in the primer. This is a wonderful, wonderful tool. I would say for anybody that wants to write a book, this would be a great place to start, and very reasonable on Amazon. And I will promise you, when we get off this podcast, which is live, by the way, let me look at the time. I can't believe how time flies. We only have 7 minutes left. But when I get off this podcast, I'm going to give you a review on this book, going to give you the 5 stars that you deserve. And I hope that people go here and get this book. So if they wanted to find this, what would they do? Just type into Amazon, Get My Book Done Now, or your name? How would they find it?
Well, my name's hard to remember how to spell. So yes, if you just put in the search bar in Amazon, Get My Book Done Now, and it's the only one that'll pop up, and then it'll have my name, Tamelynda Lux. Yep. And I'm looking at my book too, and I flipped open to page 19, and the writing prompt or content builder idea there says, so when you get stuck, right? I'm stuck. I'm halfway through my book. I've got this and that and the other, but now I don't know what else to add. You open this, and it's a flip book. You just flip it open. So page 19 says, create and add a text feature. Text features help the reader make sense of what they are reading and are the building blocks for text structure. List 3 to 5 points to ponder. Points to ponder or food for thought or for thinking about and reflection. And then the bottom, here's a little bit of hypnosis here. It says, you might become aware of other sets of points to ponder for all chapters.
I love it.
It gives you an example. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
and the card deck. So the book has...
let's talk about that. Yeah, I love the card deck.
Yeah, so the book has 19 content builders, writing prompts and activities, and 19 quotes from famous writers to inspire you. The Get My Book Done Now card deck, which is not yet available on Amazon, you have to order directly from me. It's on my website. You mentioned that earlier. This has different questions, different prompts, and it has 57 prompt cards plus bonus cards. So start with the book, see what you think, and then, there's always the card deck.
Yeah, and there's always the opportunity to call you on Zoom and to have that consultation and see if it's a good match and go from there. And, if people are stuck mentally or emotionally, you can help them with that. You can coach them and after the fact, you can help them, with a book. I will have to say that writing a book and spending time doing it and not having it done really well is such a turnoff. It's like, I guess it'd be like showing up at a date and your shoes are dirty, or your nails aren't clean, or you got maybe spaghetti sauce on your tie or your dress. It's who you're presenting, how you're presenting, and you need somebody to look over your shoulder. I will say I'm terrible at editing my own stuff. Can you edit your own stuff, or you need someone else to look at your stuff?
I have a secret weapon. I have a secret weapon, which is a husband, who is a retired college administrator. So he reads all my material. But then occasionally I have hired a professional editor on top of that. Yeah. It's always good to have an extra set of eyes. Yeah. I've just never been. Go back to your date analogy, right? Your first date, you know, the first time you went out on a date and you said maybe to your mom or your dad or your brother, hey, do I look good?
Yep.
Check me over before I go out. Same concept.
Exactly. So that's what you do. You help people look good, and if they have a book within them, you can help them. What it comes down to is, we don't see what we don't see. The story of going over to the cupboard and looking for the salt, you can't see it, and your family says it's right there and you don't see it, or whatever the situation is, we have these blind spots. We tend to delete things. We tend to distort things, generalize things. So if you have somebody that says, hey, do you realize what you said here? Or you realize, like one of my friends put together a book, and he was getting political, and I don't want to get to political on this call, but he was getting political, and he was a good friend of mine. And I said to him, I don't know if you want to go there. I love the book. I love the title. I love you. I just don't think you want to say something about this guy or this person. And so that was taken out. And I think that was a good thing. Even people like Mark Victor Hansen, for some reason, about 10 years ago, I got a chance of seeing his copy book. I don't know what they call it, but a book that came out before it came out. What do they call those things? It's kind of like spiral bound, but it's not. Yeah, advanced.
Your advanced reader copy,
Yeah, I was working with somebody, and I got to see one of his advanced copies, and I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. There's a process here. You don't have to make it up. You don't have to figure it out. You have people like you that know the process. So believe it or not, we got 2 minutes left. So in the last 2 minutes, is there something that you want to say that I didn't ask you, something that's on your heart, your mind that you want to share, including your website, that I just didn't get around to because we only have 2 minutes?
I'm gonna borrow it from our mutual friend, Dr. Richard Nongard. You have a book in you? Just write the damn book.
You know what you got to say? You got to tell him I said hello. But you know what I love what he says is get the book done. A book done is better than a book that doesn't ever get done, right? And you're right. Once you get that done, you're going to do more and more and more.
Well, and the credibility, even if you're still in a paycheck job, in a career job, or especially if you're a speaker, right? You want to have the added credibility of having a published book. In the 80s and the 90s, it was you needed a business card. Now you no longer need a business card, and you needed a book. Now you actually need a book and then a second book and then a third book. So it all adds to your credibility in the career world.
Yeah, and I think if anybody's really serious about being a professional in this regard, they need your expertise, and it's a process, and you've been through it. You've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. You're a hypnotherapist. You've coached people, and I know, just talking to you and being on the class with Richard, I know you're very detailed, very specific, and you take your work very seriously. So I would highly recommend people get a hold of Tamelynda Lux. I'm going to go on Amazon in the next 60 seconds and give you that review. So thank you so much for being on this podcast. I hope you had fun.
Oh, my gosh, Greg, thanks. It was real great, and I really look forward to seeing you back in Richard's class for your next book.
I will. Okay, have a nice week, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
You've been listening to the Greg Dwyer Radio Show, brought to you by motivational speaker Greg Dwyer on buildingfortunesradio.com. check out Greg at gregdwyer.com. Be sure to download his ebook at gregdwyerebook.com to stay focused on what matters most to you. That's www.gregdwyerebook.com. We want to thank you for listening. Now go make a difference in your world.